Just last week, we commemorated the Yahrtzeit, the anniversary of the passing of Mr. Baruch Spivak, who was the inspiration for the Torah Outreach Program. But tonight, the 23rd of Teves, is the anniversary, the Yahrtzeit of Mr. Mordechai ben Tzvi Hirsch, Mr. Mark Neuman, who, if Baruch Spivak was the inspiration, Mark Neuman was the poster child of the Torah Outreach Program. I met Mark one time when I was in a facility, which at that time was a kosher facility, no longer is. Somebody told me, or asked me if I could go to his room. They said, there's a very depressed man, he's in a lot of pain, and he just needs to talk to somebody. And I said, of course I'll go. And as I was about to walk into the room, that person warned me, said, by the way, Rabbi, be careful. He's a Holocaust survivor, and because of that, he's very negative, very cynical about Judaism, and he may give you a hard time. I said, I've had worse. I walked in. We began to talk. But the first thing that caught my eye, on the walls of this man's room, on the walls of this man who was supposedly anti-religious, were pictures of Hasidim, Hasidic Jews. And at some point in the conversation, I asked him, like, who are these people? And he said, with a sad smile, those are my parents. That's my brother. That's me. Those are my grandparents. And they're all gone, except for me and my brother. We talked a little bit more. And somehow I was able to convince him to come down to a class that I was giving. And I gave a class in the weekly Parsha. And I gave out papers so people could follow along. He immediately took his paper and stuffed it into his pocket. And I said, but we haven't even begun. And he said, I can't read it anyway, Rabbi. I'm going blind. I have macular degeneration. But I'm keeping it because I have a daughter that's interested in these things. She's very interested in Judaism. I'm not. And I said, really? You have a daughter that's interested? What's her name? And he told me her name. And I said, it turns out that I know your daughter. I know your son-in-law. I know your granddaughter. Because I taught them. I taught your granddaughter in a Hebrew school I used to teach in. And because of that, Mark and I became very good friends. And he started to come to my classes every single time. Never said a word until one time. I was talking about Shabbos and the importance of honoring Shabbos. And Mark stood up, holding on to his walker, and he was red in the face. And I'm thinking to myself, oh boy, here it comes. All this anti-religious stuff is about to come pouring out in front of a crowd, and there's no way I can stop it. And he said, the more you put into Shabbos, the more you get out of it. I remember growing up, every Friday afternoon, my mother would put out some insignificant lunch. Don't remember what it was, but it was something very quick. We ate quickly, and my father rushed all the boys off to the mikveh. And at the mikveh, there's somebody going around cutting everybody's nails for them and throwing the nails into the fire. And we'd come home, and by the time we got home, my mother had made a metamorphosis. Lunch was gone. There was a beautiful white tablecloth on the table, and the house was immaculate. We were all sent to our rooms to prepare for Shabbos, and then we were all called into the dining room when my mother was ready to light candles. There was a silver candlestick representing everybody in the family. And my mother would hold her hands over her eyes for a very long time. And when she took her hands away, I always noticed that her hands were soaking wet from her tears. And then my father would cart us off to shul. And in our house, my parents never had to remind any of us, you can't do this on Shabbos. No, you stop doing that, you can't do it on Shabbos. Never had to remind us because there was such a feeling of holiness in our home that it was automatic. We knew automatically what we could and couldn't do. We didn't have to be reminded. And then he said, and the Nazis took it all away. It's gone. Because when I came back from Auschwitz, my house was burned to the ground, so was my grandfather's, and so was my uncle's. So I said, Mordechai, that's one thing I have to disagree. It's not gone. Come to my neighborhood for Shabbos, you'll see Shabbos kept the same way it was kept back in Czechoslovakia. You go to your own daughter, and you'll see she keeps Shabbos the same way you kept back in Czechoslovakia. Well, as time went on, and this facility started to go downhill, his daughter asked me, where should we put him? And I suggested a facility in my neighborhood that was a kosher facility, a facility that kept Shabbos, a facility that sadly no longer exists. But she put him there. And I don't remember if it was once she put him there or before. I had an extra class that I was giving, and I invited Mark. It was a class in Pirkei Avos, Ethics of the Fathers. And Mark came, Mordechai came, but he wouldn't look in the book. He wouldn't look in the Sefer, and he reminded me, I keep forgetting that he can't see. But yet, he sat right across from me. There were 3 or 4 other guys there. I took people who had a little bit of a background in learning for this extra class. But I noticed something. Mark wasn't looking at the Sefer, at the book, but his lips were moving word for word with what I was saying. And he was even preempting what I was about to say. And when I was finished, I asked him, and he said, I can't believe this. When I was a kid in Cheder, in school, in Czechoslovakia, my rabbis made me memorize this by heart. And I never thought of it since the war. I was completely convinced that it's not there. I forgot it completely. But it's in there. Well, he went on to this other facility. His roommate was a religious man. And slowly but surely, Mordechai started coming back. He started wearing a yarmulke. He started wearing tzitzis. He was keeping Shabbos. He was davening whatever he could every day without being able to see. At first, he wouldn't put on tefillin because he said he watched the Nazis burn his tefillin. He couldn't put them on, but even that he gave in eventually. But then his mind deteriorated, and his daughter decided to take him home. He moved into her house right before the Corona shutdown. And I couldn't see my friend. And I missed him. So I called up Miriam and I said, can I come and visit? She said, sure, we'll sit on the porch, we'll wear masks, we'll stay away from each other, it'll be fine. I went to visit, they brought him out. It had been months already. And Mordechai wasn't talking. And they told me that he had a minor stroke a couple months ago. And ever since then, he's not talking. He can say words, but he struggles for them. He can't put a sentence together, and it's just too frustrating for him, so he just gave up talking. And I said, he has Pirkei Avos in his head. Let's get it out. Let's remind him of what he knows. So needless to say, I gave a class. We sat around the table, outside. They wouldn't put the table inside, everybody was scared. But outside on the front lawn, it was Mark, his son-in-law, his daughter, his granddaughter, and her fiance. What a group. Generations of people learning Torah together. And I gave a class on Pirkei Avos for over an hour. And when I was done, his daughter said, "Papi, did you understand everything the rabbi said?" And he looked at her and he said, "I understood every word." And everybody was in shock. It was the first time he spoke in months. I went home to type up my newsletter, and of course the newsletter was going to be all about him. And they went to dinner. They went inside and ate dinner. After dinner, his daughter said to him again, "Did you understand the rabbi?" And he said, "Miriam, I understood every word the rabbi said." And again they were shocked, and his aide took him out for a walk in his wheelchair. And she called from the next block over. He passed away. His last action was to study Torah. And he passed away. When they called me and told me, I didn't believe it. I was in the middle of writing a story about this incredible thing that happened with the learning. And I thought then that right now I'm in tears. I miss my friend. But someday I'm going to be very grateful for this. And today I am very grateful. I had a piece of bringing this man back. The Torah Outreach Program brought this man back to where he should be. He one time asked me, he said, when he saw his mother's hands covered in tears, he wishes he knows or he knew what she was saying. And I said, I know what she said, because my wife has it in print. She was praying that her children and her descendants will be oskim b'Torah mitzvos, will be involved in Torah mitzvos. And she prayed with all her heart and with her tears. And her prayers were answered. Mark's daughter is married, running a Torah home. Mark has a nephew who gives classes in a first-line yeshiva, top-notch yeshiva in Baltimore. But that was descendants. What about our own children? So Mark had another question. He always used to ask, like, why am I still here? Why doesn't God just take me? All I do all day is suffer. I'm in so much pain. What does God want from me? But I think I know the answer. His mother's prayer. She didn't want him to leave this world until he too followed in those footsteps to be osek b'Torah mitzvos. And he became a Torah-observant Jew who was osek b'Torah in the last minutes of his life. He was involved in learning Torah in the last minutes of his life. That's the last thing he did. His last words were, I understood. I got it. And he passed away. Is it sad? It's beautiful. It's beautiful. I miss my friend. But his life ended on such a beautiful note. Osik b'Torah mitzvos, involved in Torah and doing mitzvos. But that's what the Torah Outreach Program is all about. Take a look. Please. Go to our new and improved website, TorahOutreachProgram.com. Flashing across the screen now. And see what we do. Go to the sweepstakes site, 100ksweepstakes.com/top. Don't just look, I'm not asking you to go just for a donation. I'm asking you to go because there's a video up there that shows what we do. Take a look. We're bringing Torah to people that have been otherwise forgotten. Take a look and become part of what we do.